Hey guys, Jamie Emerson here, founder of Chronic Comp. I'm here today chatting with Summer Moore, who had chronic fatigue syndrome for a number of years. She's a working mom of two kids, and she actually overcame chronic fatigue syndrome through essentially using the power of her mind, which is actually crazy. And so that's why I wanted to get her on the podcast to talk a little bit about her journey through chronic fatigue syndrome and out of it. How are you, Summer?
I'm good. Nice to see you, Jamie.
Good to see you too. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Um, can we just get started by you maybe telling us a little bit about your chronic fatigue journey, where that started, and and then kind of like sort of the journey from being diagnosed, started getting it to recovery.
Well, it kind of started when I was a mother of two kids. I had second baby, 6 months old, and I was just so tired. And as a mom, people always tell you, "Oh yeah, it's tiring, it's tiring." I think I just think no, I want to fall over flat on the floor. So I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
And yet, I had a toddler and a baby who woke up all the time at night, so I wasn't sleeping at night. And a very stressful home environment. But yeah, anyway, this whole like fatigue that I kept getting, I just thought there's got to be something else. So I went and got tested and found out I had glandular fever. And in the following 5 years, I had recurring glandular fever, which is also known as, I think, mono in the States, and it comes from Epstein-Barr virus. So it's nice, three names to know it by. Yeah, and that just was reoccurring in my life. And that was in part because of having a baby and toddler and no support really from my husband or partner at the time. And living in actually a really toxic home environment that was quite emotionally abusive. And that just wore me down, on top of just generally being a mother. And with that, with chronic fatigue, mono, the way to get over it, if you go and see the normal doctors, is they say just go home and rest, which works well if you have the ability to do that. But I didn't. I was mostly raising my children on my own, and I just didn't have that opportunity. So I was I wouldn't say doctor shopping, but because most doctors will say just go home and rest. I'm like, I need to have something more. Are there
Good enough.
the medications I can take? If it's a virus, how do we get to the heart of it? Did a lot of research on it. But basically I would get better 80% and then I'd drop back down. And that was also because during that period, my marriage ended, which was a huge relief in a lot of ways emotionally. But then going through a divorce with someone who is quite very toxic to you is really tough.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of bullying and abuse, and I'm taking on that as well as figuring out our future with two small children and being compromised with this fatigue. So I think, but it doesn't matter whether it's divorce or any other stress going on in your life. Just layering that stress. I think being a mom is stressful. Not having support is stressful, not getting sleep is stressful. But if you're studying or you've moved country or you've started a new job or moving house, there's ways you should do it, and just having it all laid on top, it for me just crushed me. Because prior to that, I was quite a high performing person. I was adventurous with hiking, and I did long distance bike riding and running and marathons and half marathons, and I was quite fit and active. And then in the workspace, I worked in pretty hardcore sales environments in IT, as well as consulting before that, with a lot of travel and long hours. So I kind of thought, I can handle a lot of things. But I think, your mind takes you somewhere, but then your body is really trying to teach you what you can and can't handle. And we don't listen to it until it's often very too late. But sometimes too, life events happen, right? People get in accidents, people die. There's different stressful situations, lose jobs. Look right now what's happening with the coronavirus situation. Like, there's a lot of stress going with people, and you can't control that. And it's not your fault, but in any way, when you end up with these illnesses, it's your responsibility to try to get over it. So I had this recurring
Well,
glandular fever.
Sorry, can I just touch on that? Because you say something big there. It's your responsibility to get over an illness. Why do you think that?
To get over, I think look for the solution. And I would say because for everyone, things happen. Things happen to everybody, right? Everyone's got, I wouldn't say their baggage, but they've got their lot in life. And for some people, it's like asthma. For others, it's diabetes. For some, it's food allergies. For some, it's different mental health struggles. Everyone's usually got something, and you have to own it, accept it. It's not your fault, but then it is your responsibility to do something about it. I think we can't go around saying, oh, I get depressed and therefore I can't do this and I can't do that. And it's like, and I've been in those spaces. And I know, what, you have to be very careful of labels and labeling. Because then when we use that as a shield of almost not continuing to search for the solution or find recovery, or realize at the end of the day, you can visit all the doctors you want or go through all of the, but it all comes back to you, and you have to make the decisions that are right for you because it's your life. It's not theirs.
That's just interesting that you say that, because that's definitely was my experience with chronic fatigue syndrome, like going to see all the doctors and them not having answers, and I had to advocate for myself. I had to do the research. I had to say, can you do this test because I think it's actually this. And there was only one time where I saw a doctor and they diagnosed me with something completely unexpected, like other than the chronic fatigue syndrome, and that was thrush. I had like a brown spot on my tongue, and a doctor was like, oh, that's thrush. It's usually white. Thrush is white, but I mean, as a 23-year-old, you don't normally get thrush. Anyway, that being said, yes, I that's been my experience as well, that you definitely need to advocate for yourself and take responsibility. That's just a life thing, taking responsibility.
I've got a psychology undergrad degree, and that's the one thing they said, is that to be very careful of labeling people because they will then hide behind it. And even with chronic fatigue, it's like, I took a long time to even diagnose it, as you know, because they've got to rule out everything else, which is a lot of things that cover those symptoms, as cluster of symptoms. It tends to be like that umbrella term, but it can cover like lots of different diseases. So to even when you kind of know that you have it, to actually get someone to diagnose you is really tricky. It's a grey area. A lot of GPs, is who you visit first, don't know much about it. And I think GPs can't know everything. They've got to cover such a huge, broad spectrum of diseases, and have the solutions basically for everyone. I don't expect them to know everything, but just that desperation that you have is like, there's something wrong with me. And people just go, oh, you're just tired, you're just a parent, oh, you're going through a divorce. Or it's like, no, there's something really, really wrong. And just having that, like, first kind of, I think, identified. I think even if you can't find it, you know it yourself. Like, you know when things are right and not right with you. And I think to listen to that inner voice, because often we go to professionals and they say, oh, no, you're fine. And thinking, I'm not. Like, you've got to listen to that. And then if their solution doesn't work for you, you have to keep on searching. I think, like, to me, I don't give up on anything. And I think that was maybe part of the beautiful part of the journey, is that you realize how strong that you are with keeping on fighting and looking for solutions, and trying one thing and trying another. And I thought, even if someone said to me, you got to drink, ox's blood for a week, I would have done it, because I just didn't want to be in this space, right? Like, I just can't operate like this. I can't live in the 10%. That's how it felt. So as I said, I had like 5 years of this recurring glandular fever. So I'd get better, then I'd drop down, and I was going through a really stressful divorce as well, but which people go through, but it's soul crushing at times, and that just drains from you. And then you've got this other thing, and then I have children just needing me as well, just to have that just taking so much energy from me. Then I after 5 years, I felt a lot better, 80% better, decided to go take on a new job and or take on work again. And with that, selling in the house and moving, and then having a big parenting mediation that was really, really stressful. I layered it, and I just crashed and burned. So the Epstein-Barr virus came back. And then I could say I couldn't get out of bed, but I had to because I had 2 children to get up to. But if I had the option, I would have stayed in bed. And it came with, as a lot of chronic fatigue sufferers, that fibromyalgia. So that crazy aching pain, you can't sleep, you got foggy brain. What else? They say it's like the day you feel after running a marathon whilst also having the flu and a hangover. Like you just can't connect your thoughts and you can't find the words that you usually used to use, and then everything aches and you can't sleep properly, and then there's the pain. So that's what you try to describe chronic fatigue as, I think, is the best way to do it. And then you sleep and there's no recharge. And I just felt like all I could live was that, or like you, that 10% life. And I'm like, I can't. It's just, I'm a person who does a lot of things, and I can't live like that. And probably like you're thinking, my future is not going to look like this. And I went on all the chat sites, as you do, to try to find solutions. And you go on the crazy diets, right? Remove all of this and then remove all of that. And then you don't even know what to eat. I remember some days I'm like, I don't even know what to eat. So I'd be eating a lot of eggs. And then I started eating too many eggs. And it was like, what to eat anymore? Because everything is something that could trigger you or make you feel bad or worse. And then you realize you have an anxiety around eating, or I have an anxiety around eating, but you know, your stomach, like your whole body is in this, we don't know what to eat anymore. So even eating is, if your digestion is affected, and you start on that path of a little bit, to be honest, craziness. So I had to start looking at, you know, all the advice that was coming out of these kind of places and going, well, this is getting too crazy because I don't even know what I can eat. And then knowing what to do. And then people saying, oh, you know, I've had chronic fatigue for 20 years. I think, as you know, when you read that, you're like, oh, I can't have it for 20 years. Like, this is not my story. And I think, as I told you in the last time we spoke, was that was a big eye opener, as I realized that I couldn't and I wouldn't join the chronic fatigue club. And I think that's important for a number of long-term, like, chronic diseases, is to be very careful of joining the group where you all are like, oh, poor us, and oh, it's so hard, and no one gets it, which is true, but being in that mind state isn't really healthy, because it's almost you subscribe to saying, this is what it's going to be. And I felt that it was really important.
It's a delicate balance, I think, from what I've experienced myself and what I've seen, because you need those moments of woe is me. You know, we all need those moments of like, I've definitely had those moments, and it's like, but it's like you cry, you have a woe is me moment, and then you move on. You're like, okay, next thing. You know, that's,
I you know, you're actually, it's a good point. I must say, when you say that, reminded me, in the early days, I was came across quotes from Christopher Reeve, you know, who was Superman, and, you know, he had his debilitating accident, and he said that he would allow himself every morning 20 minutes to feel sorry for himself, and I would call it, you know, a pity party. And I think that's good. You have to honor your feelings, though. You say, you know what, this really does suck. This isn't fair, and I don't want this life. And I think you do have to honor the feelings, and then you have to give it time, and then you got to move on. Because if you stay in that space, well, I call it pity city. I used to, you know, working a lot of change management, and it's like when things change, it's like you can end up being in this pity state. And Pity City is a place that you can visit, but you can't stay. So I think, but true, yeah, you're right. Honor it, and it is good to connect, to know that you're not so alone, and that it's not in your head.
But crazy thing though, I think what kind of blew my mind is when I saw the statistic around chronic fatigue syndrome, at least in Australia. 200,000 Australians live with chronic fatigue syndrome, and the recovery rate is 5%.
Wow.
So it's like, you know, like when you're living with it for 20 years, for 10 years, I don't have a solution for that. I know for me, I recovered. I know other people that have recovered, but it's one of those delicate things where it's like you kind of straddle hope and then also the reality that sometimes people don't ever recover. And that's okay. Like, that doesn't mean they're any less than a person. It doesn't mean it
Oh
just,
no, I think that's a really hard place to be. Like
yeah.
I just think, but I think too, you got to what's right for you. Like I think if I accepted it and said like, this is the way I was going to be, I think too having two small children that relied on me,
Yeah.
that it's a game changer for life. Like I think I really often didn't have any when I was in those bad states, which we get into because when there's no hope, depression is generally lurking on you. And but I think I don't, I have two little children, so I have to make this work.
Yeah.
And I must say, if I didn't, I don't know where I would be if I had still had that chronic fatigue state.
Yeah, I think it's great, like where you're at, for sure. I think definitely not wallowing in pity, and it's a delicate balance. And I think my encouragement to anyone is have that determination, choosing to say like I'm gonna get better, and I don't care how long it's gonna take, and whether it be full recovery or partial recovery or whatever, like it's about the mindset for sure.
Yeah, I think that's right. Listening, like I always tell my kids, like listen to how it feels in your heart. Like if someone says something mean, or if you do something mean, like how does that feel? And I think that's an important detector for when we are going to, that desperate search with practitioners. Like how, what do I say? How does that resonate with you? How does that feel for you? And also trying to use that as to what makes you feel better, because just raising your vibration around what feels better to you, whether it's being around certain people's company, whether it's watching like comedy, like there's huge studies on people just watching comedy and how it lifts your spirits and it lifts your vibration. I don't think vibration sound like a woo-woo word, but it's lifting your energy state where your body is better at repairing itself. And I think try to seek out as much of that as you can, because you can get stuck in that spiral of the old story of this is my life, I can't change it. But yeah, and you completely can. You've got to work at it though. It's that whole, we talk about changing thoughts. Like you can change your thoughts. You have to change your mind. Like that's the one powerful thing you have, is that you can think this way, but you can also think that way. And it's your responsibility to catch yourself when you're spiraling into the negative thoughts and poor me and catastrophic thinking, what's going to happen to my life, how I support myself, to, you know what, this isn't healthy to have this thought. I'm going to think about something else.
And also, just for our listeners, I totally agree with that. If you're feeling that way, get help, and you feel like you can't do it on your own, there's definitely resources out there. Reach out to us through our Instagram, through our website, and we'd love to get you connected with a psychologist or counselor. So yeah, for those of you listening, there's options, and I've personally been in a place where I've had been in that downward spiral and gotten counseling, and it's been the best thing. So on that note, I'd love for you, last time we spoke, you talked about that moment when you were in the US and you had that moment of like where you actually felt like you were just healed in that moment. Can you tell me a bit about like how you got to the US, where that started, and then what happened?
Yeah, so I'll let you know that I did a lot of saw lots of different people. So like kinesiologists, people say why, and kinesiologists work in energy, and I needed energy. So I saw them, I saw doctors, I saw integrative doctors who I found really are the best, and Chinese practitioners, and tried lots of people who would sometimes help in a little bit or would last for a day and then it'd just go back. So also it's hard when you try and you get better, then you get that backward 3 steps, and that's really hard on your motivation. So anyway, someone recommended a doctor called Dr. Michael Bellick in Queensland, who unfortunately I think is practicing right now.
Okay.
But I spoke to him and he was fascinating. He's really on the cutting edge of medicine and the latest technology, and he said what he would do is look at all my blood work and just see if I was in the healthy range or not. And he said, it's not just about physically, it's mentally too. There's a large part of health, and it's true, it's mental health, and somehow we just came to separate them. We just look at that organ or that part, but we're part of a whole system, and our brain has a huge role to play in that. And he said, I want you to look into Dr. Joe Dispenza and then another man called Dr. DiMartini, and look at their work. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. And by the way, too, he'd had a lot of success with people with PTSD and other diseases through his practice. So yeah, Dr. Bellich told me to look into Dr. Joe Dispenza. I started to look up his stuff on YouTube. There wasn't a lot. I bought his book, which is called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, which is a nice little, slap around the face. And I like the thing about with Dr. Joe Dispenza was he just talked about how we do get set in these certain mind patterns, really, of thinking about the past, pre-planning for the future. We don't allow really any space in there. And that's really the heart of meditation, is that how do we just give our mind at first a break from everything? And so anyway, I read up on his stuff. I did a little bit of meditation before. 20 years I've dabbled in meditation, more Siddha yoga type, but not too deep. But with his, I really liked it because it's guided, so you don't have to think and you don't sit there saying Om. He guides you through the whole thing. He explains everything in easy to understand ways and uses a lot of scientific studies. And it's some of it's based on really ancient teachings, which a lot of cultures have used for thousands of years. So I ended up having enough energy to be able to book a flight to his weekend workshop in Chicago.
Wow.
Because I just found that things in person work much better than, for me, reading a book or being at home. It's like when you go to church or if you go to yoga, being around people in the same space is actually really uplifting to your own energy. So I did that, and it was funny. The night before the event started, I should have said the day before, I was in bed for 3/4 of the day at my friend's house, and I was still in a lot of pain, not sleeping. The night before, we had a pre-event meeting, and they said, okay, come back tomorrow morning, make sure you finish the pre-work, and that was doing an online meditation course. And so that night, I went and did the final meditation in his it's a program just gets you ready for his events, explaining all the background, just lectures, really easy to do. And so I did the final meditation of that. And in that meditation, it talked about, because it's guided, letting go of the things that hold you back and letting go of limiting beliefs. And we all have them in different ways. Maybe some people don't, they're the lucky ones. And it was about just how are you when you let go of some of those things? And two big ones that came up with me were not being good enough. Wow. And I've always struggled with perfectionism and trying and being a high achiever just so I could be good enough, and really working myself hard for that fear of failure. And the other one was worthless and worthlessness. And I thought, I personally don't think that I'm worthless, but I had been accepting situations where I behaved in that way. I was accepting being treated by people in a way. I'd say I think I'm worth more. I would accept their treatment of me. And that's, toxic and abusive relationships that were not good for me, and people that really, really took a lot from me personally. So I think I'm a natural giver. I'm optimistic, and just didn't set boundaries on people that were influential in my life, or I gave them that influence. Yeah. And rather than saying, you know what, this isn't healthy for me and you're not good for me. So in that meditation, I just really dropped those whole feelings of feeling worthless and not good enough. And I remember just feeling extreme joy, like I was flying with the seagulls, and I was crying, and it was tears of just joy. And I felt so free and in such beautiful bliss. It was like a giant hug, 1,000 hugs. And afterward, I just knew it was gone. Wow. And the next day I got up and I ran to the lake and I went for a swim. And, I hadn't done running for maybe 18 months or more. And to swim, and I was awake all day because it was a meditation retreat, but we had 14-hour days, and I was awake. Usually I wouldn't be able to, as you would know, you can't manage that. The concentration or the pain was completely gone.
Wow.
So
That's crazy.
it was crazy. All the food intolerances I had as well. I wasn't eating wheat or having dairy. Going out a sandwich, my stomach was fine. I had milkshakes. I could have a glass of wine. Prior to that, I think if I had that much wine, my whole body would just be completely depleted and I'd be completely drunk. Yeah, I was up late at night. I went visited friends in the US that I had afterwards, and I was just back. It was amazing. The only thing that hurt was my legs because I hadn't run for such a long time. So then, yeah, it's that was just for the weekend, and he teaches you breathing techniques and just, you know what, he tries like pulling your mind out of your body. We get set in these patterns, in these ways, and then we think this is it, and we buy into a story that isn't true, right? We can change our stories. We forget how powerful we are. We forget how we really are extraordinary beings or absolute miracles. We come from miracles, how babies are born and made. It is extraordinary. And we forget the power that we have, and that sometimes we get stuck in these loops that are unhealthy, and things like disease come along to kind of punch you in the stomach or kick you up the butt to wake you up to like, what is going on? And you have to go on that journey and really figure it out.
Wow. Yeah, that I relate so much to what you're saying as well, because that's when I went to counseling, when I had chronic fatigue syndrome, I had done all the things, and then that's exactly that I wasn't enough, and that I was worthless, and that I needed to be perfect. The exact same core beliefs. And and that's, that was definitely the root of the majority, and still is the result of the majority of my health issues, because I do still have some, and it's been a journey for me. It wasn't an immediate, like, I have this revelation that all of a sudden I'm worthwhile and that I'm enough, and it's been a journey.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's not like I just suddenly went, oh yeah, I'm back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. I completely understand. Because like even with that, I think renewal, or I guess, what they say is that in this meditation, your brain gets into brain states where it just does a reboot of your whole body.
Wow.
It also gives your body a break, because we are, like I said, we think about the past, we think about the future, we've got all these things we've got to do. People are on anxiety, depression, all this stress, all this pressure, and there's no like,
Yeah.
so particularly when you're unhealthy, you're fighting things, but when are you giving your brain and your body a break? Just a break. It's like when you sleep, but sometimes, as you know, when you're in pain, you can't sleep properly.
Yeah.
So it just allows that space to just stop and even heal in that. So even if you can do a little bit of meditation, it just gives everything a break. And then you can build on it from there. And I think it's really important with today, with all the constant information at us, to create that space for a break, to heal and to reflect and to create a different path and different loop. But the other feelings that you talked about, I came home after that event and I started to feel them back again. And I was like, wow. And you go look at your environment. I was affected by two really significant people in my life who I realized were sucking the life out of me, or you could just say toxic people, or and I continued to allow it to be in that way, and I had to put boundaries. And I think it's what we have to do. You got to save yourself. You have to save yourself in the end with health. Like we just spoke about, like you have to say, all right, I can't be around you because I don't have capacity anymore, and I'm compromised, and I can't do that. So having to have not hard conversations, but just removing yourself from situations or stopping communication with certain people. Some people you can't, like, I have an ex-husband, but it's like the way I would communicate with him, just to keep it really minimal and simple. Or like I had people in my family who weren't too healthy for me. And I thought, we don't have the same story anymore. So I even had frank conversations about what I will and wouldn't tolerate. going forward anymore.
That's really interesting though, because I've had very similar revelation of setting boundaries, having conversations. I find that it's hard to do that because there's an initial emotional, it's almost like a breakup. There's an initial emotional like sadness of cutting someone off or changing the relationship, but what comes out of it is actually so much healthier than what was behind it. Did you find that?
You're probably a good person who feels the way that you felt with that worthlessness and stuff. It's sometimes hard to even have the conversation, or not being wanting to have conflict. But yeah, I think in one particular situation where I really just shut down that relationship that was affecting me so much, I felt so good. And I'd forgotten how, actually, I don't think I've ever felt as good in my life with just cutting that off. And I also had to recognize, as you might too, certain people you want relationships with, that you have them with, that you want to be better, and you have this ideal in your head. And people can have this with like parents or siblings. And the truth is, when you look at it, it's like you just don't get that. Like, unfortunately, you don't get the magical brother or sister or mother or partner. Like, that's just not what you get. And you have to accept that, rather than we live in this ideal that, oh, if I do this, it'll change, or maybe they won't. Like, no, you just sometimes have to accept certain things in life and just say, I'm going to just look after me and what's right for me. And I'm sad that I won't have that relationship, but I never actually had it anyway. So
yeah, and also trust. I think for me, it's like, okay, that relationship isn't going to ever look like I want it to be, but that means that if I accept that, that's going to leave me open to find other relationships that are going to be more fulfilling.
absolutely, right. And then you keep yourself open to that too. You're like, you know what? I want to have great people in my life. I want to have awesome friendships. I want to spend more time with the people that make me feel good. And I think that's a really good indicator that what makes you feel good. What people light you up. Be around them, and are you also participating in lighting them up as well? I think that, like, because you use that as your kind of navigation.
There's so much here as well. Like, I think we're very much on the same wavelength in terms of all of that. In terms of meditation, what does a typical meditation session look like for you?
So after there's this Dr. Joe event and doing his meditations, which you kind of step deeper and deeper into meditation. I came back. I was here 3 weeks. I started to slip back into what felt like chronic fatigue again. So I went to one of his 5-day retreats. So I thought, just to be away from your environment, which I highly recommend to a lot of people if you can. Sometimes you need to escape what you're in, maybe go away even for a week and reconsider things, or just have some time to yourself. Can be incredibly healing. Just to be away from responsibilities even is huge.
Yeah.
So anyway, so my meditations, when I went back to this 5-day retreat, and what I found, it just kind of gave me extra power to just be on top of at least the health side of things, or my physically, I felt just amazing. And the meditations would get into states where, I'd be like, just see gold and beautiful things, and you'd feel the most beautiful, beautiful love. And you would realize that all came from in here. And we look out everywhere for these things, right? We buy stuff or in people, and we realize that you can get it from here. And when you be in these states, you don't want anything. You just want to stay there if you can. And you love everything, and you love everybody, and it'd be wonderful if everyone was in that state, really. So just getting to those states made me realize I need to, for my health condition, I have to meditate. That's my medicine, whether I like it or not. I do find it hard to sit and meditate. And many people say, oh, I can't do that. You can. You just have to do it. It's like sit-ups, so no one really wants to do them.
It's discipline.
It's discipline. And I'm not very disciplined. So I came back, and I want to say I wasn't a hardcore meditator, but I would try to do it in the morning because it sets you up for the day. It gets that mindset. I'm not that way anymore. I'm this way. And 20 minutes in the evening, if I could as well. 20 minutes. If you do deeper meditations, it's about 40 minutes to an hour. And I would just follow his meditations because I didn't have to think. I just sat down, put it on, and it would just click, and I would get into these deep states.
So this is Joe Dispenza.
This is Joe Dispenza's.
Does he have an app, or do you go on YouTube?
Actually, a lot of them, if you used to be, you had to buy them from his site, so you can purchase them from, I think drjoedispenza.com. He's got a lot of YouTube videos if you want to find out more information about him. He explains his background and his approach, and it's not crazy woo-woo stuff. It makes complete sense scientifically. Okay. Yeah. A lot of doctors, all types of people are at his events. But you can YouTube Dr. Joe Dispenza meditations, and there's lots of free ones already on like YouTube to follow.
Okay. Yeah. For those listening, we'll put it in the show notes, so you guys can go to the show notes on our website.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do kind of recommend just even like reading the book. It's like $20, and it gives you a good understanding and even yourself and the thought patterns you set yourself up for, and how meditation can just really give you a break and help you recreate a different future, which is what I've done since then. And those feelings that you talked about, letting a lot of them go. But they don't serve us. I know we get hooked on them, but we have to be, vigilant in seeing when they come up, when they show up, and are they? Is that true? Are you worthless? No, you're actually not. Like, we have to question some of the craziness of our thoughts and go, what, that's not a good thought. I'm going to pick another one. And you have that ability, that beautiful free will that I think we forget.
So on that note, like, say you're having a bad day, and you're like full of all of these negative thoughts and woe is me, or like it's this person, that, et cetera, what happens in your brain when you're having that kind of a day and you're trying to get to a more positive place?
I think, I still definitely have those. What I try to do is when I really notice it, like I think just recently I was just going to come down in a bit of a funk, and I can struggle with more depressive thoughts, and that's my thing to battle, right? I own it when I see it. I don't, medication doesn't work well for me in that space at all. So I have to do something different. Usually exercise is one of the best things for me, even though you don't ever feel like doing that when you're in that state of mind. Yesterday I was like, it's too cold, I don't want to go for a run, and it's like, I need to move, because I know once it does, it affects all the chemicals in your body. You start looking at things differently, and we need to go to these places, right, to say, all right, things aren't going well, where's my go-to list? I think it's important to have a go-to list, and it's like, make yourself go for a run or a walk, or chronic fatigue, that's hard, right? And you couldn't do that, and you'd be like, I need that, but I can't do that. So other things I think to change, shift your mind, your state of mind, I found comedy. I think people forget it's so available to us, and I had this real epiphany myself. It's like, when you laugh, either even with a friend or it's something funny, you're suspended in this state where you don't think about the past or the future or anyone that might have wronged you or stress. You're just in this beautiful laughing land, and you're not often, it's only for a few moments. So if you can find someone to make you laugh, or if you can, sometimes you just self-direct this stuff, is like, find the comedians that you like or a show that you like and sit down and say, I'm just going to focus on this for the next half an hour, and afterwards just those changes chemically will shift your mindset. And that's a technique that is used by often like therapists. You're having this thought, how do you choose a new thought? And music is the other one. Like, I create a happy music list that when you hear it, it's true, your body goes, woo, it starts breaking those silly thoughts that you have. And I think, it's like I said, it's good to have that kind of that plan in place. Write it down somewhere. I'm not feeling great. These are the people that make me feel good. I'll just call them up for a chat. And then I'm going to watch these shows or rewatch that movie I love, or go for, if you can do any physical activity that does change your state.
That's so good. My counselor calls them pleasant events. So it's like, he's like, so Jami, have you done your pleasant events? Like, all these things that you enjoy doing, that's basically putting value on yourself. And I totally agree. It's like very similar, and for me it depends on the situation, right? Like I had a situation recently where I felt like this person was taking my power, like, and I was like, nah, and it was stressing me out, and I was like, no, I'm gonna take my power back. So I went on my electric scooter next to the beach and started listening to French rap, and I like took my power back, you know, internally.
Female empowerment songs too, right? You know, girl, like Beyonce, listen to Beyonce. You got your power back, and that is like the same kind of energy. You pick up on it, and your body does too. And we forget, like, it's all frequencies, and they're all. Well, one thing I've learned is like it's all about vibration, and if you can, my thing is raise your vibration, whether it's through the fun music or I don't know, company or meditation. It's raising vibration to be higher than that illness that's affecting you, and that breaks it down, because you're like, I'm booming up here, and it's not happening in your body so much anymore. It's losing its control over you, and you got to keep working at that and staying in that, and that is your job, I think, kind of till you get better and you can just keep tapping into it. And next, like, you don't even remember who you were before when you were sick. Like, I'm sure you have that. You think, I forgot how bad it was, like how much I was struggling, unless I look at some old notes that I find around the house, like trying to make gratitude lists of, oh, I was able to do half an hour or something today. You know, it's like you look at these old things that you were and you're like, I don't even remember that person anymore. And I just real my thing is to, for people in the state, is just, you know, there's a future you who is cheering you on, wanting you to come back, and they know you can do it, and have the pity moments, and then build so much of those, would you call them pleasant
events? Yeah.
Pleasant events. And you know, my path was meditation. That's because other options didn't work for me, and I was led that way. It may not be some people's, but a lot of it just makes sense. Like we have quite crazy demanding lives, and when you add a chronic illness to it, it's terribly troubling, and it's very challenging in so many ways. You've got to find what's right for you, and I stumbled across this path, and now every year except this year, because it's COVID, I make myself go to a retreat. I'm like, I don't think about it. It's like, it's done. If I can get in, I go, because it gives me that break. I get a good reset, and I meet wonderful, wonderful people as well, who you never usually meet in life. And that's also a great thing to do. Also, everyone who's super supportive, and we need that. And there's some really, really sick people there, and extraordinary things happen, but everyone's just trying. And I think it's great to surround yourself with that. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thanks so much for sharing your journey and your thoughts and your experience with chronic fatigue and coming out of that. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the podcast, get to know you. And just thanks again so much.
That's okay. And I have a list of people that I thought were great with kinesiology. Like, every kind of person added their little bits to my recovery. And even I think someone's understanding yourself. And to rule out other things that it could be, like toxins in your house. Like, you just never know what could be affecting you more than anything else. And it's good to definitely rule out a lot of things. And even people, you rule out people. So,
exactly.
So we'll put all of, for those listening, we'll put all of those resources on the show notes, and some of those practitioners on our database. So go ahead and go to the show notes on our website, have a look, follow us on Instagram. And thanks again, Summer. So lovely chatting with you.
Yeah, you too, Jami.